Hey everyone, Tom here. So if you've watched one of my reviews here on the channel before, you know that it's, well, I would like to think, a well-edited video with a script where I've taken the notes from playing through, the entirety of the game and formulated them into some kind of script and recording that. But I just didn't have time with Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning. I'm reviewing so many games right now, I'm playing so many different things, which is awesome, but it means that I've had to pick and choose what I want to review and do a more, spend my time in and do a well more thought out video. And Kingdoms of Amalur is just a huge RPG, and I just didn't have time between getting a code and playing it and everything else that I'm playing to do a full review. That being said, though, I did dip my toes in for a few hours, and I really enjoyed what I was playing. So I thought I'd get something out in time for the embargo drop, so that people that are interested in Re-Reckoning can actually get a little bit of insight into the game. I've never played the original, and I imagine a lot of people haven't either. A lot of people are going to experience this game for the first time through the Re-Reckoning remaster, and I think they're going to really enjoy it. So what is Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning? Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning is the closest thing to Fable we've had since the Fable games. It is a fantasy adventure that is way more lighthearted and kind of spiritful and jovial than something that we're used to now, with a lot of fantasy games dipping into something a bit more, I hate to use these terms, but dark and gritty, right? And Fable is really the only major fantasy game that's ever dipped its toes in that genre. And based off of the cover art for the game, I would never have expected this from the game itself, but that's what it is. That's not to say that there aren't more serious elements. It's about a battle between the Fae, which are kind of like an elven race. They are older, and what the characters refer to as the younger races, so like humanity and dwarves, things that have been around a lot less than the Fae. And there was a peace, but then there was a war, and the thing is that the Fae can resurrect, they can't die. So everyone else is kind of fucked when it comes to battling them. And you play as a character that is kind of like the first successful scientific experiment in getting a race other than the Fae to be able to resurrect and be unable to die. And then on top of that, there's elements of, like, you don't have a fate, you are someone that can actually control the strands of fate, and that ties into the gameplay. And it's a kind of an intense story in that regard, but at the same time, it's presented in a much more light-hearted manner, and it's something that I really appreciated and didn't expect. I didn't know this game was like this. I thought it was going to be way more serious and way more of a grounded, for lack of a better word, RPG fantasy game than it is. So if you're looking for something with a little bit more levity, I really do think Re-Reckoning is for you, and that kind of extends into the gameplay, which is a lot more bare bones. There are some interesting gameplay systems. There's this thing called the Reckoning system, which basically means once your Reckoning meter is full, you can go into a thing where everything is slow-mo and you can take out enemies one by one, and then when you execute the final blow on an enemy, it destroys all of them. So there are intense systems, but it's really kind of stripped back compared to what modern RPGs are, and that's awesome. Like, it totally allowed me to kind of get sucked into the gameplay, because it was something that wasn't slowly introducing me to a bunch of mechanics and having me kind of slowly make my way through. It was like, cool, here's armor, you just equip it, here's your weapons, you can just pick and choose your weapons and go in, and the gameplay controls are actually really solid. I think from the overall package that a lot is kind of unchanged, so I think this is how kind of the game played back in the day, and reading some of the reviews that came out at the time, it seemed like this was a big part of why this game was actually quite beloved and became a cult classic. The gameplay is really tight and feels really good, and actually feels like it fits in like a modern day game with really tight gameplay, but because it was released almost 10 years ago at this point, a lot of the kind of fat has been stripped from the game, and it's very focused in terms of not only its progression through the world is a little bit more linear, as you can tell by the minimap in the corner of this gameplay footage that this voiceover is recording, but in terms of the gameplay itself. And I really appreciate that, especially with us having big, kind of expansive RPGs like Cyberpunk coming out in the fall that allow you to have more intricate gameplay. Having something a bit more stripped back, it's just going to stand out from everything else and become something that you don't have to necessarily get invested in. You can just have a good time playing it. I am playing it on my PC, which is, I would say, for the current situation, this is before the 30 series graphics cards have come out for NVIDIA. I'm running this on an RTX 2080 Super. I have kind of top-of-the-line specs for everything else. I won't get too in the weeds there, but this is a pretty beefy computer that cost me about $2,000 to put together. That being said, though, the game doesn't seem necessarily optimized for any of that, and despite the fact that it's almost 12 years old, it still runs with... I haven't even maxed out settings, and it's still running around 60 frames per second. So that's interesting, and it doesn't seem like they've done anything graphically other than just give it like 4K, like more high resolution textures. The cutscenes look exactly the same from what I can tell based on footage I've watched of the original game and this. There's really no difference there. And yeah, the gameplay just literally seems to have high resolution textures, nothing dramatically different about the visuals of it. So it doesn't seem optimized for high-level performance, but at the end of the day, really, like, that kind of plays into the charm of this. It's a game that is kind of put together by this like indie team and has kind of been brought back to life by THQ Nordic. So yeah, that's just my first impressions, and I really just wanted to put this out there to say I'm going to spend more time with this game, hopefully, when I get some downtime between other games. We've got more games that we're reviewing that are upcoming that I'm really excited about. Please consider subscribing to this channel. You can also follow me on Twitch. I stream there under my kind of internet handle, Great Britom. The Unranked Podcast being the podcast that I am a host of. So go follow me over there on Twitch and make sure to subscribe to this channel for all of the awesome reviews we've got coming up. Lots of really cool games on the horizon to talk about. But I did just want to say Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning is absolutely something that you, even if you have just like a curious interest in, should check out. I'm definitely going to spend more time in the game at some point, and maybe then I will be able to do a more thought-out scripted review, but I just wanted to get something out in time for embargo, because a lot of people are maybe going to want to pick this up before we have games like Cyberpunk hit later in the fall. So thank you, everyone. Consider subscribing to this channel. Follow me on all platforms, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Great Britom, and until next time, have a great time gaming.